All right, Alexander, let's talk about what is happening in France. Calls to impeach Macron, not going to happen. It looks like Macron has double-crossed Mélenchon and the alliance that he set up with the NFP, right?
That's right.
Yeah, the NFP. Yeah. I'm trying to get the NFP. Yeah, it looks like he's double-crossed them. The Olympics are over, but Macron doesn't want to approve their choice for prime minister. We talked about this in a video we recorded maybe 3 weeks ago when we talked about Lucy Gastetz. Yeah. And then we have the whole Duran thing on top of all of this intrigue that's happening in France with Macron's administration and his alliance with the NFP and appointing a prime minister. At the end of the day, the French government is in trouble. The parliament, the French government looks like we're possibly heading to some sort of a standstill and maybe even elections again in a year's time. There's a lot of talk about Macron having to call elections again. But what are your thoughts about what's happening?
Well, I think things are playing out exactly in the way that we said that they would. What Macron is saying is, look, I'm happy to form a government based on the election results. It's just that I want the election results changed. I don't want the left forming the government. I certainly don't want Marine Le Pen's party forming or playing any role in the government at all. I want my party, which came third in terms of the popular vote, but which still, because of all of the arrangements that were done with the left during the election, because there was that deal done, I want my party to be the centre of the EU coalition, and I want all these left-wing people who allied themselves with Mélenchon to leave Mélenchon and to unite with my party so that we can have exactly the same kind of government that we had before. Now, that's exactly what he's saying. I mean, he's now coming out with that quite openly. We said that in our previous programme about France, that was his objective, and he's now come out and he's making it absolutely clear, and he's making it obvious, and he's saying that he's not going to accept Lucy Gastetz, despite the fact that, as we discussed previously, she's a classical establishment insider, hardly different from him in any important respect. Anyway, he says he won't accept her because for the moment she still wants to head a government in which Mélenchon would play a leading role, and that for him is unacceptable. So for the moment, the French left, other than Mélenchon himself, are going through the motions because I think this is all that it is. They're going through the motions of saying, oh, no, we can't accept this. This is absolutely outrageous. The president is violating the constitution, or at least the principles of the constitution. He's acting contrary to democracy. We will never concede a situation where instead of the left forming the government, Macron forms the government by cobbling together the coalition that he wants. We insist that he must accept Lucy Gastetz. We insist that he must accept Mélenchon as an integral part of the government. And if he continues to take the line that he's taking, we're going to try to impeach him. As you rightly say, that's not going to happen. And we are also going to have protests across France, and we are going to perhaps even talk about some kind of general strike eventually, though that's not going to happen either. So they're rattling around in the box because, to be absolutely clear, the point will come, and Macron's counting on this, and I think he is right, when within the left, which is an uneasy coalition of various groups, people are going to, some of the sort of more establishment people on the left are going to say to themselves, well, look, ultimately, we're closer to Macron and his party than we are to Mélenchon. Mélenchon is this firebrand radical. He's got all sorts of ideas about Ukraine, which we're not really keen on because we're ultimately also part of the neoliberal global establishment. We have to pretend for a while that we're going to stand with Mélenchon because, after all, that was what we told to our voters. But I think sooner or later they will come out and say, well, we don't agree. We think the president has behaved appallingly, but we have a high responsibility to France. We can't leave France without a government. And though it breaks our hearts to do this and that we're deeply unhappy that it has to be done, nonetheless, very grudgingly, very unhappily, we're going to do what the president says and go into coalition with his party. And in return, we managed to persuade the president to make this huge concession, which changes everything and makes it possible. He's going to accept Lucie Castex as Prime Minister. I think that's where it's going. This is my own view. I think, as I said, you have all of this performative displays that we're seeing in the French Parliament, the left talking, they're outraged, they're furious, they won't accept what Macron is doing, they're banging the table, they're saying, we must be the people who form the government. But I think ultimately that is what they're going to do. Because you said that they'd been double-crossed, and of course Macron has double-crossed them. But of course, many of them, were willing accomplices to this double cross. They knew exactly what was happening and they knew exactly what was going to happen when the election was over. And I think that in the end, they're okay with what's going to come. I mean, I know that all this sounds incredibly cynical, but show me how cynicism about the situation that we've seen in France is unjustified. And as you rightly say, in the meantime, Macron is taking steps to show to people what a powerful and frightening figure he is. Jupiter on high, hurling his thunderbolts. He has Duran arrested at Le Bourget airport. He has a case concocted at lightning speed against Duran, a man who at one time he was praising, he gave him French citizenship, he suggested the Telegram base itself in France, he spoke about Duran as this great hero. As we see, trusting Macron on things like that, thinking that you have a good relationship with him, is the stupidest mistake you can make.
Yeah, Duran trusted Macron. Mélenchon trusted Macron. Maybe you don't want to say trusted, but he aligned with Macron. I mean, he's the big loser in all of this, is he not?
Absolutely. He is.
I mean, because when his alliance, when his coalition partners go with Macron, I mean, Mélenchon ends up being the big loser in all of this. But, he also decided that it's better to trust Macron than to allow Le Pen to win.
Yes.
So.
Yes. I mean, he has been the useful idiot in French politics. I think this is the thing to say about this, because in my opinion, Mélenchon would have been in a very strong position had events been allowed to take their course if there hadn't been this deal done between the left and Macron during the French parliamentary elections. Le Pen's party would have emerged with the majority, probably. They would probably have formed a government with the support of the Républicains. The party would have had many problems. The government would have had many, many problems at that point. But Macron himself would have been discredited. And who would have been leading the opposition to that government and able to parade that he was, the great defender of France and the Republican tradition against a sinister force on the extreme right? Well, Mélenchon. I mean, that is what an intelligent and shrewd political leader would have done. But he didn't. He didn't want to do that. He couldn't stomach the idea of Le Pen forming a government. This is, absolutely horrifying thought for him. So, of course, he listened to the siren voices, entered into this arrangement, agreed to enter into this arrangement with Macron, of all people. And as you rightly say, he's now going to be completely isolated and marginalised, and Macron will come out on top.
Does this help Macron, or does it help does this help Macron's party, Macron's ideology, the globalists, in 2027, I believe, is when we're going to have the elections? Does this help them, or will this hurt them in the end?
Well, if we were talking always about conventional politics, electoral politics, the way you and I once remember them being conducted, it should hurt them. It means that Le Pen and her party are now the only opposition in France. The left is very soon going to be completely discredited. Even Mélenchon, who has been marginalised, people will be saying, well, he's led us in completely the wrong direction. He set out to oppose both Le Pen and Macron, and we've ended up with Macron as a result. So, logically, because things are not going to get better economically or politically in France over the next 2 years, this ought to set up Le Pen for victory in the 2027 presidential elections. And that is what she thinks. But let's go back to the question of what has happened with Durov, the arrest on Durov. And of course, this is not an event that's happened in isolation. We see all sorts of actions being taken to control information flows, lots of talk about what the Russians are supposedly doing in the information space, which is being used to control the information space even further. We see how law enforcement is being used. Who's to say that by 2027, all of those things won't have been taken very, very, very much further? And, the word will go out in advance of the elections that democracy is in peril. Action has to be taken to protect democracy from the danger of the extreme right. All kinds of steps are taken, therefore, to harass Le Pen and her party. Eventually, a massive campaign in the media is launched against it to justify whatever those steps are. And it proves impossible for Le Pen and her party, in the end, to mount a coherent election campaign. I think we have to say this because this seems to me the direction of travel across the West now. Electoral politics, as we used to know them, are breaking down. And given the kind of government that we are likely to see formed in France before very long, I suspect that process will be taken much further before long.
Yeah, 2 years is a long way off.
It's a long time.
And a lot could happen for Le Pen or against Le Pen. Yeah,
just to give you an example of the kind of atmosphere, I was reading. Now, this is, of course, in Britain, but it reflects the mood across, I think, certainly Europe and much of the West. There's a well-known journalist and commentator here called John Kampfner, who historically has been identified with the left. He used to run a magazine or website or whatever it was called Index on Censorship, but he's now become, if you like, something of a disinformation warrior. He's made a ferocious attack in The Guardian on Sarah Wagenknecht, who is the leader of the left party in Germany, the party that presents itself as being on the left, but he refers to her as being on the far right. Now, that is... he does this quite consciously. He knows exactly what he's doing. This isn't a slip. If you read his article in The Guardian carefully. And I think that we're going to have a situation where everybody is represented as being far right, part of some sinister force that must be fought at any cost. Doesn't matter. Any mechanism of the law, of law enforcement, must be used to protect us from this threat. And in 2 years, in France, they can do an awful lot.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Far, she's anything but far right.
I know.
Yeah,
I know.
Anyway.
I know. But you see, she opposes the war. She opposes support for Ukraine. She's got things to say about immigration, which are not the kind of things that people in the neoliberal centre want to hear. She's got those kind of views, and that, of course, must mean that she's aligned with the far right.
Yeah. All right. We will end the video there. TheDuran.locals.com. We are on Odyssey, Rumble, BitChute, Telegram, and we are also on Rockfin. And go to the Duran shop, pick up some merch. You will find a link in the description box down below. Take care.